guys, welcome back to another episode of Beast Reviews. I am your host, Beast. As a lifelong movie lover and co-host of multiple movie-focused podcasts, including Movie Misfits and Den of Sin, both of which I will leave links in the description for if you're interested in checking those out. I've been a longtime collector of movie-based action figures. In the last 20-25 years, movie-based action figures have come a long way. Ever since McFarlane in the 90s, the sculpts have gotten better, likenesses have gotten better, and even now articulation has gotten a lot better for these movie-based figures. And sort of leading the charge with that is NECA. Last few years, they've really become well-known for their movie-based figures. They're highly accurate, highly detailed movie-based action figures, such as Aliens, Back to the Future, the Friday the 13th, and Nightmare on Elm Street franchises, and a ton more, honestly. I've been a big fan of theirs for years, and especially now. With recently, they've announced some Universal Monsters that will be coming out, which I'm very excited for. The American Werewolf in London werewolf figure is coming out. It looks incredible. So today's video is going to be my top 5 most wanted movie-based NECA figures. As a huge movie fan, there's tons of movies I would love to put on this list that maybe wouldn't be as realistic for NECA to release, just because they may just not have the audience for. While I may want a Neon Maniacs toy line, probably in the minority for that. So I sort of took that into consideration with this top 5 list. But I feel like all the figures that they've done so far, such as Aliens and Back to the Future, they're big tentpole movies. They're very large movies, big franchises. So I took that into consideration, but still tried to make it either figures that have never gotten a toy line before, or maybe had a toy line in the past, but definitely need an upgrade in that hyper realistic NECA style with their newly perfected articulation for highly detailed figures. Because if you remember the Movie Maniacs line from McFarlane and the real toys looked cool, but they were sort of static action figures, very little articulation and stuff. So, I want that modern articulation that NECA has been giving us. So let's get into it. My top 5 most wanted NECA action figures based off of movie franchises. Number 5, Lost Boys. So this one's a little bit of a cheat because NECA actually has already made a few Lost Boys figures. Their partnership with Real Toys from about 15 years ago, 20 years ago. But like I mentioned previously, they look cool. It came with some cool accessories, but they were very, very limited for articulation. Now, Lost Boys is one of my all-time favorite films, and it's, I think a lot of people who are fans of the 80s horror love Lost Boys. It's sort of the pinnacle of a cross between that MTV generation and vampires. In fact, they're sort of credited for sort of reinventing the vampire at that point, making them more young, making them more hip. It's a fantastic movie with, incredible characters. One thing I would do with this toy line that I would ask from NECA is not just give us, David and Michael, which we got from the first time they did it. This is a movie with amazing characters. I want Frog Brothers. I want a Sam in his ridiculous 80s styled attire. I want a Max. I think a Max figure with both a human head and a vampire head would be incredible. Give us all the vampires. But definitely at least give us Michael, give us David, and then give us the Frog Brothers. I think those would be the most popular. But I want them all. I'll take every figure. I'll take a figure of Nanook. Like, give me them all. Especially Grandpa. I'll take all of the Lost Boys figures that you want to give to me. And I think it's a big enough franchise that has a big enough following that I think a lot of people would be extremely stoked on. In fact, those original Real Toys NECA figures go for a pretty good amount in the secondary market. And I know a lot of people missed them when they first came out. So I think it's kind of a no-brainer for NECA. They've already had the license in the past. Let's get them again. But in that, sort of ultimate editions that we've been getting with Scream and the Nightmare on Elm Street figures and all those incredible, Friday the 13th Jason figures. So that's my number 5 is Lost Boys. Who's number 4? Let's get into it. Number 4, Death Wish. While Death Wish may not be this sort of cultural zeitgeist film, the giant film franchise of say something like Back to the Future, I think Death Wish is still a very important film and sort of a very iconic film. Sort of spawned a million copycat films in the 70s, sort of created and then perfected the vigilante film format or genre, subgenre that became very popular at that point. Which is actually one of my all-time favorite sort of subgenres of films and of action films, with films such as Vigilante or Savage Streets with Linda Blair, which is a fantastic, sort of grindhouse film. I have an undying love for Linda Blair, but I also have an undying love for Charles Bronson, the very stoic, stone-faced, cantankerous actor. And Paul Kersey, the character, is so iconic. He's sort of, when you say vigilante movie or taking law into his own hands, you sort of see Charles Bronson's face. And while, like I said, the film franchise may not be as such an obvious choice as something like Back to the Future, I think it's an excellent choice. And I think he has become such an iconic character in the last 40, 50 years. I think it's a great choice. I think, with 5 films and a remake, which I don't think anybody's dying for a remake figure. I could be wrong. Let me know in the comments. But you could do a couple different looks. I really love the over-the-top insanity of Death Wish 3. But I think maybe stick with the first one, the sort of iconic, first film. But again, I'll take any figure. In fact, I would love them to see, even going down to the, Crackdown and all 5 films. Give me multiple Paul Kerseys. Give me ski cap Paul Kersey. Give me, architect attired Paul Kersey. I'll take whatever. But I think just, having a Paul Kersey action figure on your toy shelf, if you are a movie lover, specifically a sort of exploitation, grindhouse, early kind of 70s action film fan, he's sort of, such an important character in film. Again, controversial films, what the message is. If you know anything about the film franchise, and it was based off of a book, and, sort of the book had a very specific point of view, and then the producers of the Death Wish films kind of went the opposite direction, and some people think it glorifies violence and things, but either way, regardless of the the message of the film or the what the film has sort of come to stand for, it's still a very important film, still a very exciting film. And I think, like I said, Paul Kersey and and the fact that Charles Bronson is such an icon at this point, has never had a real release action figure, a wide release action figure, is pretty wild. So that's why it's number 4 on my list. Death Wish, the Charles Bronson version. No offense, Eli Roth or Bruce Willis. But yeah, number 4, Death Wish. Number 3, Fright Night. We started off with Lost Boys, and here's another 80s vampire movie. Fright Night is one of my all-time favorite films. I think it's probably the quintessential 80s horror movie to me. I think for multiple reasons. One, it's very much a product of its time. The whole vibe and energy of the film really only could have existed in the 80s. I like that it's an 80s movie that is a love letter to a previous era of horror, with both the Hammer films and Universal horror films. I think everybody in the cast is fantastic. It has a vampire named Jerry. It's such a great movie. And I think definitely in the years, it sort of has become that 1-2 punch with Lost Boys as the 2 best, or at least most beloved, vampire movies of its era. I think, to me, so many of those characters deserve to be immortalized in, articulated plastic. Charlie Brewster, that's a no-go. Jerry Dandridge, also very obvious with, especially the end of the film look. So iconic. I actually love Jerry Dandridge so much. I did some artwork for the band Night Demon, and I did a poster and t-shirt for them, and they told me I could do whatever I wanted. I wanted to do Jerry Dandridge. So, but Evil Ed, definitely, especially multiple heads. That's one thing about these figures. I think you would do an ultimate edition so well because you could include multiple heads, human heads, vampire heads. With Evil Ed, you could give him the famous cross burned into his forehead look. Again, such a great movie, such a phenomenal time capsule of the 80s. I love it. It's like I said, it's one of my all-time favorite movies. That's why I think it would be perfect to be included in NECA's film series. Is it the sort of big enough franchise to ensure success at the mass market level? I don't know. I would hope so. I think it's gotten such a diehard following, and horror collectors these days, you will usually snatch up whatever is released, especially if it's gotten any kind of pop culture love, such as Fright Night. So that's why it's number 3 on my list. Number 2, Cobra. Full disclosure, Cobra is my all-time favorite movie. It is, to me, exactly what I want when I go to the theater. It's a movie I've loved since I was a little kid, and sort of, as the years have gone by, my love for it has just grown exponentially. Now, to be fair, this is probably the most, maybe less loved, least popular film that I will be mentioning in this video, but it's my most favorite. So, and I think in the last few years it has kind of grown a sort of cult reputation that has sort of gathered some momentum, and I think it's become a lot more popular in the waning years since it was initially released in 1986. Stars Sylvester Stallone. Directed by George P. Cosmatos. Some actually say that, it really Stallone directed the film. George P. Cosmatos is actually the father of Panos Cosmatos, who recently is well known. He's a filmmaker who did Beyond the Black Rainbow, and then most recently Mandy, which has sort of become a giant cult classic, modern cult classic in its own right. But this film sort of is a crime thriller action film. It's a very interesting movie. It sort of has its own vibe. Sylvester Stallone plays Marion Cobretti, which is still the greatest film character name of all time. A member of the quote unquote zombie squad, a sort of division of the LAPD who deals with the worst psychos and the most nefarious criminals. There's a very interesting backstory. It's based off of a novel that someone got the rights to and completely changed. It was initially supposed to be Beverly Hills Cop, which was actually originally created for as a starring Stallone vehicle. Stallone didn't end up liking the script. It was too comedic. They eventually went on to rightfully give it to Eddie Murphy, and it became its own historical film franchise. But, sort of Cobra is this amalgamation of films. It's a hard-boiled crime thriller. It's a action film. At one point, I think it was notorious for having the most on-screen deaths in any film. Brian Thompson plays the Night Slasher, the villain of it, who's one of my all-time favorite character actors, and specifically this role, he's one of the most terrifying movie villains of all time. I could talk about this movie nonstop. To my left, right outside the screen, you can't see, but I actually have a sort of mini shrine to my love for that movie. The main thing that's been missing, though, are action figures. To me, both Stallone as Marion Cobretti and Brian Thompson as the Night Slasher, two of the most coolest looking film characters of all time, with some amazing looks in the film, very iconic looks. Having a Night Slasher with his, custom knife that you can still buy to this day. They have some they have licensed versions of the knife Brian Thompson uses in the movie. Stallone's, very iconic look with his, his aviator sunglasses. And just to me, I've been dying for toys based off this movie for decades. I've seen some people take some hot toy customs and really make some cool looking Stallone Cobra figures. Very, very expensive figures, though. And I think it deserves a mass market release. While it might not be an Aliens or a Predator, I think Cobra definitely has. First off, it's Stallone alone. His name should carry weight with it. In this point, if you're a classic 80s action film fan, obviously Stallone is one of the biggest names in that genre. In Hollywood history with the amount of success he's had with the films like Rambo and Rocky. But I want to see a Cobra figure. We've gotten Rocky figures, we've gotten Rambo figures, very recently from NECA. So give me a Stallone Cobra film figures. Again, I would specifically want both Marion Cobretti and the Night Slasher. I want both. In fact, of the two, I might even prefer just the Night Slasher. I want a Brian Thompson Night Slasher figure, one of the most terrifying looking movie villains in film history. But definitely would love a Cobra to go along with it. But so NECA, if for some reason magically you are hearing this, I will even say every time NECA would make any kind of post about any movie related figures, I'd be like, that's awesome. Where's my Cobra figures? Again, knowing I'm in the slight minority there, I almost just fell back in this chair. Just knowing that I might be in the minority doesn't stop me from really wanting these figures, which is why it's number 2. Will always be number 1 in my heart, but that's why it's number 2 on this list. Number 1, Bloodsport. Man, I love me some Bloodsport, and I love me some Jean-Claude Van Damme. If you don't know who Jean-Claude Van Damme is, he was one of the reigning kings of the straight-to-video, low-budget action films that became very popular and very successful in the 80s and 90s. He's the Muscles from Brussels, known for movies like Kickboxer and Lionheart and a ton of others. But Bloodsport is I think, his most beloved film. It's sort of his quintessential film. I think the film itself actually was very influential, and even like video games such as Street Fighter, the Street Fighter franchise, and Mortal Kombat owe a lot of its existence to not just Jean-Claude Van Damme, but specifically Bloodsport. And there's some history in there that you can Google yourself. But it's based off of a quote unquote true story about a man named Frank Dukes. Is a martial artist named Frank Dukes. If you don't know who Frank Dukes is, definitely Google him. There's some amazing videos here on YouTube about him. Very notorious for being sort of a charlatan of the martial art world. Actually, one of a few con men of the martial arts world. There's actually a few of those guys out there, Lord Dante and a few others. But Frank Dukes was, I think, one of the most notorious out there for his tall tales of being a martial artist. But anyways, say what you want about him, but he was successful enough with his con that he ended up getting a movie based off of his quote-unquote life, starring Jean-Claude Van Damme. I think it's one of the most perfect, martial art tournament films. I love that it doesn't stray too far from, the main plot of the film, which is this competing in this martial arts tournament. There were martial art tournament films before this and tons after, but I feel like this is sort of the perfect example of that sub-genre of the action film world. There are other tangents, other plot lines that take place outside of this tournament world, but they're much less than most other films. A lot of these films, especially in like the Street Fighter movies and Mortal Kombat films, they always the tournament sort of incidental. They're always trying to explain why there's a tournament, what these characters are, but not in Bloodsport. It's literally just pretty much all ass kicking, amazing characters, and I think that's why it sort of stands out amongst its peers. And I want action figures of them. Number 1, obviously, you have to have Frank Dukes, Jean-Claude Van Damme's character. I think in his sort of iconic final fight scene with his little black kind of like bicycle shorts look, and then his little golden sash. I think if you're a big time action film fan and a Jean-Claude Van Damme film fan. You know, who amongst us doesn't want a little Jean-Claude Van Damme figure from Bloodsport doing the splits? I want a Ray Jackson figure, one of my all-time favorite film characters, starring the awesome Donald Gibb, who's probably most well known for playing Ogre in the Revenge of the Nerds films. But I would hazard to say, and I don't think I'm wrong here, I think most people would, even more than even a Jean-Claude Van Damme figure, I think most people want a Chun Li figure. I think, you know, Chun Li played by the Hong Kong action film, you know, icon in his own right, Bolo Yeung, the heavily muscled Chinese Hercules Bolo Yeung. You know, he's such an iconic villain. He's such a great, you know, film character and very toyetic. I would love to see an action figure of him. You know, I would like to see, I would give me, you know, some of the other fighters in the tournament as well. But I think specifically Frank Dukes and a Bolo Yeung Chun Li. I think those two, I think most fans of this film specifically would be happy enough with those. And again, you know, I think it's, you know, NECA has done tons of science fiction films, tons of horror films, which I appreciate, but, you know, no martial arts films, no real martial arts films, at least to this point, that I can at least think of. And I think this would be the perfect film to sort of get into more of those. So let's do it, NECA. You know, if you're hearing this video, if you're watching this video, amongst the thousands of other people out there clamoring for you to make things for them, you know, I think I'm not alone. I think, you know, if you agree with me, leave a like, leave a comment, you know, in support. You know, if you have your own films that you would love to see NECA make figures based off of, let me know in the comments. You know, there's tons of films even on my own list that I had to leave off for the sake of brevity. You know, there will more than likely be a sequel to this video specifically, but let me know in the comment section, what are some other films that you'd love to see? Which ones did I leave off my list that, you know, you would put on yours? As always, you know, subscribe if you'd like, all that YouTube stuff. Support the Patreon if you'd like. If not, I get it. You know, I know what the economy's like. I won't hold it against you. But if you'd like to support and help this channel grow, please feel free to check out my Patreon. Link in the description. But yeah, guys, I appreciate you checking out this video. As always, support the things that you love, and see you in the next one.